Okay. Wesley, this right here video is for the ribbon cables. Okay. So when you buy this ribbon cable, it comes in a really long length, and you just cut it to whatever length you want. And I think I went like 6 inches longer than the pack that's stacked up. Okay. And or you can just basically go off what I've sent you. So just cut them the same. But anyways, right down here, and this is what I'm talking about as far as your ground. See the brown and the orange? I keep that as always as my ground. Okay. So I start this way and go across. The rest of these are basically hot. Okay, and I'll make sure and I connect these. I put these connectors on the same way every time. And if you notice, see how it's got that little notch sticking up? And that goes into the connector on the board, which all those, the way they're mounted on the board, are facing up. Okay. And so each hole, as you see, there's 16 of them. But really, these, my finger in here, these two go to the same, or basically everything's doubled. Okay. So you got your ground plus your 7, okay, so 8. So I think it's 16 wires. Okay, so you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so in these connectors, it's hard to get your finger in here and
do you think it's bad to be a Kanye?
And so anyways, the way this right here works, when this plugs onto your port, onto your board, this first one is the ground. Okay, well, over there, that's ground. See, and that's why I set them up the way I do on these ribbon cables. So when you get up here, see, the one connection has the ground on the top side there. As you notice, when I plug this on, this one has the ground. So if this was going, say, to my BMS, and connecting to it, then it keeps your ground to your ground, and then the rest of them are actually going to the hot connections on the sequential batteries. Okay. Now, when you plug this together, it can go either way, but that's why things can kind of get messed up. So that's why I basically glued this piece on here. Okay, because this right here, I'll show you. See, that pulls off. And this comes in your pack when you buy these. Okay, and this lets you connect one to the other. Okay, but this is going to be turned either direction. So that's why I kind of mark them, and then that's why I glue this thing to one of these ports, because that way you don't have accidentally, because I had it happen to me. I set it up to where these right here just plugged into this, and one of these I accidentally touched a post on one of my batteries and shorted, and I blew some fuses, and yeah, sparks, not good. So I started basically poking that into this and then gluing it. Okay, and you can go either way. You can flip it around and put it on this one and put some hot glue on it, and it'll hold it in place, and then this one will snap in. And as you see, these right here have these little raised ridges on this side, and then of course you can see the underneath. You can see the metal connectors, okay? And if you push down on these with something pointed, that will let you pull this wire out, and then you can swap them around. And that's how I swap them out and make sure they all match. Because when they come, if you're laying like it is now, the red is on the left and the black is on the right, and that way everything is matching. You know, as long as they're matching and your ground is ground, the rest of it really don't matter. But just for me, that's how I like keeping things uniform. So as soon as I got them, I swapped them all around, made sure the black was over here and the ground was over there. When you plug this into one of those meters to check your voltage and everything, they have to go in like this. So, and then your ground always has to be on the right side, otherwise it don't want to plug into the meter correctly because of the spacing of the holes. Okay, you see how the holes are toward the top, and then you got that sticking kind of down there. So it fits on the meter really easily like this, And of course, going into the meter, you have to have the ground on the far right. Otherwise, it won't work. So I kind of designed these to work with the meter, and of course, everything else made it work the same way. And then that way, if you want to use a meter, you can. If you don't want to meter, you don't have to. The system I got now, I don't even use these anymore. I just basically, this part here plugs into the board, and it's a state of charge board, which you've seen, the little LEDs. So it uses this voltage off of all these in the ground as a way of detecting the voltage. So if I want to use these, I can as a backup, or I could bring my batteries in the house and I can plug this in to a little ribbon that goes to my hobby charger, and I can balance my batteries. So it gives me another way of actually still using these connections, but I don't have to hook them up to a BMS like I was before, because I'm using a different style BMS, and I'll show you a picture and video of that new style BMS that I'm creating for my 24 volt system. Pretty neat little setup. It's not programmable like those with the Bluetooth, but you can see basically your charge at a glance, and of course the BMS is protecting it from overcharge and over discharge, and I kind of run in between the a little bit above the lowest discharge rate, like I run like 3 volts, and then I don't charge them more than probably 3.9 to 4. So I don't even charge up to 4.1 or 4.2. So then you're just running a little low, and a lot of these BMSs that I'm using to actual balance, you have to run them all the way up to 4.2. So that's the only drawback to that type of BMS. But I could bring them, like I said, I could bring them in and balance them on my hobby charger periodically, and several of them seem to be just staying balanced, no problem. So, they're not slowly getting out of balance more and more and more. If they were drifting like that, then more likely there's a bad cell somewhere. But yeah, that's kind of how these right here are set up. And of course, the nice thing about these come with a decent length of cable, and something you can either cut it off or not. So a lot of them, as you noticed, I left most of the length, and then of course maybe cut the wires on the BMS a little shorter. But it just gets harder and harder to mess with these as this all gets shorter. And then of course, when I get done and everything's all set up, then I'll take some hot melt and put on here, and it just gives you something to grab a hold of. That way when you're plugging and unplugging these, you're not putting so much stress on these connections that's going up in here, because they're just snapped up into this plastic. And when you put the hot melt on there, it actually just kind of helps hold everything together. It's fairly easy to get off. I mean, it's not super easy, but if you kind of work at it, you can. If you want to get it off for some reason, you can get it off. I've actually done a few here lately. But anyways, like I said, these right here kind of helps you to connect this one to this one. If you pull this off, it's hard to do this with one hand. I'll show you what it looks like. But see, that's how your connector works. And what that is, that this piece is just to be able to connect these two together. So you can turn it around, and if you want to put that in there, and then plug this one in here, just make sure however you position it. So like this right here would have to go in this way. As you notice, the ears match up with these. So to get this ground and this ground to be connected, you would want it plugged in to this way. I don't know if I can do it on camera or not. There you go. So then plug that all the way in, put you some hot melt, and then like I did, to make sure I connected the right ones and didn't accidentally connect them backward, I labeled the one that was going to be connected in battery 1 as 1, and then when I done the other one, I made it 2. Of course, the battery 2, you're not going to have this ground wire. You're just going to have all these right here as your hot because you don't want the ground being connected on the number 2 connection, because it will short. I mean, it will melt, because basically the only one ground is all you're needing, and the rest of these are being seen as positive connections, okay? And then the BMS will work correctly, and it will see everything voltage-wise correctly. So, and that lets you connect right up to that. And there's your ribbon. And basically the ribbon, I just take it and take a razor knife and go back, about an inch probably when I'm building one of these. And I slice in between each one of these. Take some little small wire strippers, strip them off probably 1/4 inch or so, and then heat them up, tin them with solder, and then I'll actually twist each one together, like these first 2. I'll twist them together, solder it, twist those 2 together, solder it, twist the next 2 together, solder it, nip it off, leave maybe 1/8 inch sticking out. Then you take these and skin these back probably 1/4 inch, tin them up, nip them off, and it's just so much easier. And of course, when you, especially on these right here, the heat will actually make this insulation kind of move back a little bit. So when you're tinning these with solder, they'll actually melt a little bit and kind of get longer. So that way you don't have such a big overlap right in here either. So you nip them off about an 1/8 inch once you overlap them, and you just put your heat on there a little bit with your soldering iron. It will make that connection, and then you just slip your shrink tubing, which I usually keep it quite a ways down here to keep it from shrinking from the heat. And you just slide it down here, work it up over top of this one, and make sure it's on here a little bit, on here a little bit, and then just heat it up with the iron. You can use a hair dryer if you want to get one of those heat guns. I got one of those solder stations that's just got both, and so I use that. Okay, so anyways, make all those connections and you're rocking, man. And these right here, I found you can make these crimp.
No, I think it's
These are crimped on. Okay, you can do them with a pair of pliers, but I wound up buying just the regular standard crimping tool, and it works so much better. Okay, and if you use just a pair of pliers, it doesn't put even pressure, and I've noticed some of them would break. Where this piece actually, this piece right here has a whole bunch of little V shapes of wires that pokes through this and makes your connection. And with those pliers, it really crimps it on there, and you don't have any gap. The other ones, when I did it with just a regular pair of pliers, it would have a gap. And you can't hardly see it, but right now you see no gap between where that's together on top of that ribbon. And so using the proper tool makes a big difference. It's so much easier. You just slide them up, push down a little bit, it kind of bites in a little. You slip it in the tool and then crimp it, and she's done. And then it's got this other little piece here, it clips in here, and it's just kind of a backup, in my opinion. It kind of helps to keep everything locked together. These all snap in, and they're removable. If you ever want to remove it, you just have to take a small screwdriver and you push down, and you take that one out, and then you push down on the other one, and you can actually take them apart. I've done that before to fix a mistake or move one or whatever. And then of course you can even add them later on if you decide later on you want to add more connections, because I had to do that with my new BMS setup. They were set up for 10, then I went down to 5, and then of course after I added the stated charge board and I added the BMS board, I didn't have enough. I had to actually add one of these, but it was easily done, especially with the crimping tool. Just added another one to it. Anyways, I'll send you some links to how to get these and where I get them at, and they're cheap. You get like a pack of them for like $6 or $7, I think, and it's got like 10 or 20 of these in there. It's just got several, and I just usually when I get ready to start making these. figure how many I need and just buy, like a couple packs, because it's going to be 2 per ribbon, and then you're going to have 2 per BMS. So that's 4 basically per battery. So you got one coming off your BMS to go to the ribbon, one coming off the or 2 coming off the ribbon. That's going to be connecting to your little meter, and then one's going to be going to the BMS. That way you don't. I mean, you could go with just one, but you would be unplugging and plugging, unplugging and plugging. So check your state of charge. You'd have to unplug it from the BMS, and this way you got 2. You just leave the meter either hooked up, or you just go down through there and you check each one. So either way, okay. So anyways, I'll send you the rest of that information.